One of the great battles in the Christian life is to keep the gospel simple. I think, especially in our North American culture, or if we've grown up in the Bible Belt, we have a lot of Bible knowledge and we know a lot of Christian things. And it's hard to keep the most important priorities that Jesus wants for us. It's hard to keep those as the main priorities. We see that in the Church of Ephesus in Revelation. They were doing many good things, but they'd lost their first love. Right? They were still patiently enduring evil, and they were examining things. We look at Revelation chapter 2. The Church of Ephesus, they sound pretty good. I know your works. This is Revelation 2:2. I know your works, your toil, your patient endurance, how you cannot bear with those who are evil, but have tested those who call themselves apostles and are not, and found them to be false. I know you're enduring patiently, bearing up for my name's sake. You've not grown weary. These are all good things. But I have this against you, that you've abandoned the love you had at first. And I really believe that is the challenge for all of us who have been believers for some time. And especially if we've grown up in a generational Christian environment like many of us have, we can get into the rut of just doing Christian activities and losing out on that first love. And so I've seen something here in the First Timothy that constantly makes me come back to this, and I can check myself to make sure that I'm not drifting into activity versus worship. That's the big challenge. And in 1 Timothy 1, verse 5, it says, the aim of our charge is love that issues from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith. So that's the goal of the instruction. Out of all the details, and there are details, and we don't want to overlook them. I think that's part of a good heart, is when we take God's word and we say, Lord, I want to know everything that you have to say for me. I want to know what all your promises are. I want to make sure that I'm living right. I want to obey you in every area of my life. I think it's coming from a good place, a good heart. But in all of that, we don't want to get distracted. It has to come down to this. The goal of our instruction, I think, is, I thought I read it in one Bible version like that. The aim of our charge, the goal of our instruction. So the summary of everything we're trying to learn is this: to keep love that issues from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith. And it is a fight to keep this as our goal, because we might drift on our own with getting busy in things. And I believe that Satan also knows that a Christian who's busy with activity rather than sitting at the feet of Jesus and desiring to keep this simple relationship with him, he knows that can make us ineffective. So I believe he'll throw all kinds of things at us, good sounding things, to get us off of this. And actually, Timothy does say that here, or Paul says it in Timothy, verse 18. We go on, it says, this charge I entrust you, Timothy, my child, in accordance with the prophecies previously made about you, that by them you may wage the good warfare, holding faith and a good conscience. By rejecting this, some have made shipwreck of their faith. So again, it's a warfare. That's what it says here in verse 18. Warfare, to hold faith and a good conscience. And if we're going to reject this, we're going to make shipwreck of our faith. So that's how important I've been seeing this lately, how important it is to keep these few simple things in mind. And that's what I wanted to look at today. To learn to fight, and fight well, fight the proper way. There's all kinds of things we might want to do and think that's fighting in the spirit. But this is what Paul is saying. Fight the good fight here. Wage this good warfare to keep faith and a good conscience. So those are the most important things that Paul is trying to get across to Timothy. We need to take this to heart and learn to fight this way too. And that means to get rid of any distractions that are going to get us away from this simple goal. The gospel is always more simple than we want to make it. And here's one of these nice summary verses. Here's the goal of our instruction: pure heart, good conscience, and sincere faith. Love with that, from that place. So I just thought it would be good to look at each of those words and make sure that we know what that is, what each of those is. So a pure heart, well, the pure in heart are the ones who will see God. That's what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount. Pure heart for me is, when I think about purifying gold, there's the heating up and burning away the dross so that only what's pure is left. Purified water, you boil it so that all the impurities are off and only the pure water is left. That's what a pure heart is. We go to God with no strings attached. That's who's going to see God. If we have strings attached, well, James says, you pray and you don't get, because you ask amiss. You want to consume things on your lusts. You ask for wrong reasons. So that's not a pure heart. The pure in heart are the ones who say, Lord, I don't have any agenda other than what you have as an agenda. And that includes my life. My life becomes part of your plan. That's the pure in heart. They're going to see God. And the other thing is there, so we got a pure heart. We want to have a good conscience. Well, I think a good conscience is a tender conscience that hears God's still voice quickly. And God doesn't yell. He doesn't make us do things. He's very, very patient and very gentle with us. That's his nature, to be gentle. So if we're going to hear God, we're going to have to be quiet. And so a good conscience is one that has not rejected God's silent, gentle nudges. We have to hear God's nudges. So some of the things that I specifically feel convicted about is my interactions with my children. I can sometimes be reading, or I might be looking at something on a screen, looking at something on YouTube, and the kids come and they want to ask me something or have a conversation. And sometimes I'm tempted to just not even make eye contact, just give them a quick answer, and hopefully they move along here. And I've been convicted that my conscience is saying, no, that's not good. Put that thing down, whatever you're doing, and interact fully, engage fully in whatever it is that they want to talk about. That's how you keep your conscience clean. Because there's something that said, there was a little prick there. Hey, this isn't good. You wouldn't want somebody to, snub you like that. Give them your full attention. Well, if you consistently say no to that, the next time you or 10 times later, you may not feel that conviction. And you might just continuously give half-hearted answers to your children. And then one day we'll wonder why they don't want to share with us anymore. I don't want to get to that place where I'm wondering why I've lost connection with people that I love. I want to interact with them and fully engage in their eye-to-eye, face-to-face conversation. That's just one area that I've personally felt convicted. And so I'm just relating that because that's related to the conscience. Keeping a good conscience. That's what it says here. This is one of the key parts to having a good Christian life. It's having a good conscience. It's dealing with those little nudges when you get them. The other one that I feel about conscience is sometimes there isn't a Bible verse to explicitly say what you should do in a situation. I've definitely over the last few years really been convicted about that if I say something rude or even if I was pretty, especially in work, I think this example comes across in for me, it comes alive in the work setting more. If there's been something's going on and maybe I say something a little roughly to somebody at work or impatiently, I've definitely felt convicted to make that right and actually make that phone call and say, sorry, I I spoke rudely to you there, and to make it right. And there isn't always a Bible verse. So trying to relate that to conscience here, there isn't always a Bible verse to back that up. I can't find a verse that always tells me exactly what to do. But if I look at the law of keeping a good conscience, if that's higher to me than just what's right or wrong, I could kind of shrug that off and probably convince myself, well, he didn't take it wrong. He didn't really think I meant anything by that. I could kind of run through a bunch of things like that and write it off. But I'd be dulling my conscience. My conscience was pricking me. Make it right. So I'm trying to live and learning to live in this way, that my conscience is a higher law for me than just, is it right or wrong? Or can I find a Bible verse for it? If my conscience is convicting me of it, then I need to deal with it. And it's such a truth for the rest of our Christian life. Conscience is a big part of it. There are a lot of things that are not written on our heart, and they're not wrong for us. And so it can help us to see other people in the right light too. You may have a conviction about something that you may no longer be able to do because your conscience is telling you that. Your conscience is working on you. But the next person may not have had that. Their conscience isn't saying anything about that particular thing that you now can't do. So if we live by that law of the conscience, we won't judge other people when they do things differently than we do. We'll have a lot of understanding and realize that there's things about in our own life that our conscience is not speaking to us about. And there could be others looking at us and saying, well, why do they still do that? Well, if your conscience isn't speaking to you on that, then you're clean. That's the beauty of the mercy and the grace of Jesus. He's not asking us to memorize 613 laws like they would in the Old Testament. He's asking us to live according to the light that we have. And so if in some areas we don't have light, and I know that we don't have light in every area, but we're only being asked to live out what he's commanded us, what we know. So let's not use that as an excuse to be ignorant. There's no excuse to be ignorant. If we have a pure heart, we're not going to be content with living at that level and saying, well, my conscience doesn't bother me, so I guess I can continue on in doing these things. Do you want to grow? Do you want to know God's ways more perfectly? Well, the pure in heart do want to know that. So it's good. We can be at ease about what our conscience is telling us or not telling us today, but we don't want to settle there. As we continue to press into God and follow him, he's going to, by his Holy Spirit, he's going to pinpoint some other areas, and then our conscience will be stirred up again. So living by the conscience is a higher level than just, can I find a Bible verse for that? And so I've used that when I've thought about these things, because I sure don't want to, it's embarrassing and it's humbling to have to phone somebody and say, I spoke roughly to you at work there. Sorry about that. It's not fun to do that. And I'd be tempted to find a Bible verse that tells me I don't need to do that. But the law of the conscience overrides that. The law of the conscience, if I want to keep my conscience clean so that I can continuously hear the voice of God, I'm going to humble myself and just make that phone call. So that's a little bit about the conscience. And then it says we should also keep a sincere faith. Sincere faith. And I've learned that the word faith actually means trust, and that helps me to understand it better. Because faith, the word gets used so many ways. I have faith for that, or I don't have faith for that. that's not really how I see it anymore. I see the word faith as meaning trust, and that's really what the word means. So I want to trust God. I don't want to trust in, even when I say it that way, I trust his promises. That's not as pure as saying I trust God. I trust in his character, trust who he is, not just what he's going to do. I actually trust who he is. That speaks more about an intimate relationship with God than just having read his promises and memorizing them and saying, yeah, I believe those. I trust those. How about trusting in God's nature? That's a deeper level. So the way I've thought about faith is like dependence. It's depending on someone. Knowing that you can't do it yourself causes you to put your trust in someone else. And that's how we get saved from our sin, because when we realize that we can't do it ourselves, we put our trust in someone who can do it for us and who did do it for us. So that's trust. So in a practical way, how do I live like that every day? I've thought about it like a blind person. A blind person can actually learn to walk through their house. I've lived here in my house long enough that if I was blind, I could probably work my way around the house. But if I was in a new town or new house, I would need to hold on to somebody's hand for every step, every corner. I don't know where the steps are. I don't know where the door is. So that's how I think about faith on a daily basis. I think of myself as a blind person who is saying, I have never walked through April 30th, 2023 before. So I'm going to hold on to you like I'm blind because I've never been this way before. And then tomorrow, I'm going to have that same attitude. I'm going to wake up and say, Lord, I need to cling to you. I've never walked through May 1st, 2023 before. That kind of desperate clinging on to you. I don't know what the day brings. I don't know who you're going to bring across my path, who I might need to share a word, or some situation where I'm going to be tempted to sin, or a coworker is going to maybe push my buttons again, and I don't want to have to phone them back and say sorry. That's good to do that, but the higher way is to cling to the Lord at the beginning of the day and say, I don't even want to go to work without your presence leading me. If I did that every day, I wouldn't have to make that phone call. So that is how I see faith. The blind person clinging desperately to their leader who can get you through each situation, each day. That's the meaning of, Lord, I need you. I need thee every hour. Think of yourself as a blind person being led. And this is the essence of the Christian life, the goal of everything that we could learn. Just remember, it comes down to this. The aim of our charge: pure heart, good conscience, sincere faith, and love. So then love. Well, I know the classic definition is 1 Corinthians 13. When I meditate on 1 Corinthians 13, I think more about my love towards others. Love is patient and kind. It's not arrogant. So that's how I should treat others. But when I think about love towards God, I'm not really arrogant towards God, or I'm not really rude towards God. So I think of some other definitions or explanations of love in the scriptures that help me to get to that initial love. Yes, 1 Corinthians 13 is, hey, we need to love one another. That's the second commandment. Love your neighbor as yourself. But the first commandment, sometimes we skip that one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength. And I believe that's the love that it's talking about here. The aim of our charge is not primarily to love your neighbor. That's the proof that you love God. But the aim of our charge needs to be love for God. I may not always have people around me. So, circumstances come and go, assignments come and go. But love for God, that I can do, even in a jail cell with nobody around, or on a quiet day, nobody around. In my quiet life, that doesn't seemingly affect anybody. I can love God with my thoughts. And so we need to get back to that, where when we think love, we think love towards God. When I thought about that, I thought there's some other scriptures that actually speak to that really well. 1 Corinthians 2 verse 9 says, "But as it is written, what no eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor the heart of man imagined, what God has prepared for those who love him." And that is actually quoting the Old Testament, Isaiah 64:4. If we go back and look at Isaiah 64:4, the wording is a little bit different. And so it's very interesting. 64:4 says, "From of old no one has heard or perceived by the ear, no eye has seen a God besides you, who acts for those who wait for him." Okay, so the Old Testament says wait. New Testament says love. So is that a contradiction? Well, I've come to see that the New Testament interprets the Old. Jesus came to fulfill the law, which means to fully explain it. He said, "You've heard it said this way, but I say to you this." See, you thought adultery meant, stay married, don't be with somebody else's wife. But I'm saying to you, there's a higher understanding of this. That means don't even look with lust at somebody. So Jesus redefined. And I've seen that other scriptures are like that too. And this is one of those. 1 Corinthians 2:9. If you just read the Old, you would say, what God has prepared for those who wait for him. New Testament says what God has prepared for those who love him. So I need to put those two words together, and I realize that when Paul wrote here, love, he's not contradicting at all. He's actually saying that if we want to love God, we need to wait for him, right? Because both of those are scriptures. So how do those fit together? Well, the New Testament tells me that love is to wait for him is to love him. So that really helps me to put in a practical way. How can I wait for God and show him love? Well, how about when things seem to take long, when you're not getting answers immediately, when your circumstances are tough and they're not changing immediately? This is our chance to love him. We wait for him. We continuously wait for him. So waiting for God to act while we're fighting this good warfare to keep a good conscience and faith, that's love. So we can continually give the timing and the situations to God. Think of that as a love offering. Okay, Lord, I would like to have this answer. I would like to have this situation changed, but I'm going to wait here, and I'm going to praise you, and I'm going to continue to obey you in everything that I know to do right now. I'm going to continue to do that. I'm going to be patient. That's love. You're offering a love offering to God and saying, my life is going to express that I love you by how I wait for you. And there's actually other verses in the Old Testament that talk about waiting for God. And it's interesting to look those up, some of those original Hebrew meanings. I think it's the one in Isaiah 40 where it says, "They that wait upon the Lord will renew their strength." Well, that word there, wait, means to adhere or stick to God, because you're convinced he's good. That's why you can stick to God. That's why we adhere is like glue. You stick to God like glue out of love. This is our act of love. So it's very practical. Love is not a feeling. Love is this act of, I'm waiting. Yes, God knows that we have needs and we ask, but we continuously wait, keep our conscience clean, keep trusting him like a blind man needs somebody to follow after. And as we wait, we're actually proving our love towards him. So here's another scripture that I thought tied into this is Psalm 37. again, we just need to keep keep God's goal in mind. What is God's goal? It's not just finding the promises to make my life work better. It's very specific, and we've talked about this here locally, that Romans 8:29 is the goal, and the goal of our instruction. We're talking about this here. The goal of our instruction is love, good, sincere faith, good conscience. Well, here's another one of those grounding verses, Romans 8:29, and it's one of those things that I always need to keep putting in front of me. I need to keep reminding myself of that. Romans 8:29. So, for those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son. That's the goal right there. The ones that he called them to be conformed to the image of his Son. He wants us to look like Jesus. And so when that becomes my goal, to look like Jesus, then it makes me want to wait out that time of uncertainty, because I have this expectation that after I've waited and I've kept my conscience clean, he's going to act. And that's what the verse I was going to read here, Psalm 37, verse 5 and 6 says, "Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act." Okay, well, how is he going to act? It says here in verse 6, "He will bring forth your righteousness as the light, and your justice as the noonday." So we just need to remember that all those promises about waiting for God, what kind of breakthroughs are we waiting for? He knows that we need physical things, so we should definitely go boldly and ask. We need the Lord to break through in that. But above that, it's this idea about conforming us into the image of his Son. And it says here, this verse in Psalms is saying the same thing. He will bring forth your righteousness. So let's commit our ways to the Lord and believe that he's going to act, and he's going to bring forth our righteousness. That's what he wants to do. And we need to know that so that we can participate with him and gladly, willingly wait, knowing that it's our righteousness. It's which really it's his righteousness. It's Christ in us, the hope of glory. It's nothing about us. He's not trying to elevate Joe Tycrope. But God is wanting to take vessels, little lumps of clay like me and all of us, and say, this is what I can do when I put my spirit inside a frail vessel of clay. This is what I can do. He wants to show himself to the whole world through weak vessels who did nothing except say yes to God and say, I will wait for you. I'm going to cling to you, and I'm going to do whatever it takes so that I can keep hearing your voice. This is the Christian life. And it's such a battle we're getting distracted, we're getting pulled in every direction to get away from that simplicity. So let's fight that warfare to not complicate things. Fight that warfare to keep your conscience clean so that the Lord can speak at any time of day or night even, and we'll be ready to listen. Keep your faith. Wage that warfare to keep your faith so that every day you fully believe that you need him. And let's keep our hearts pure so there's no strings attached. Let's battle. Let's fight. Let's act like we're in a war to keep our hearts pure. And that war is basically just coming to God in simplicity and saying, Lord, I need you. It's one of my favorite songs, Lord, I need you. I think it explains this whole cry of our hearts so well, the cry that God wants us to be crying out. But it is a warfare. There's going to be these attacks coming from every angle to get us away from the simplicity of this gospel. But as we fight through that fog of distraction, and Christian activity and press into that life of, okay, Lord, it doesn't matter if there's anybody else in the world, it's you and me. I want to be your servant. I want to hear you and I want to follow you wherever you go. We fight through that. The Lord will be able to shine his glory to the lost people around us. And it's not going to be our efforts. There's a couple of verses that I can't think of the references right now, but it says that, I think it's in Matthew, where it says, they will let your light shine. And then what are they going to see? It says they're going to glorify your Father, which is in heaven. They're not going to give us the credit. I mean, sometimes people do. They're not seeing, they don't always know exactly how to word things. And sometimes people are looking to elevate other humans. But if we're doing things for the glory of God, we've got this life of this warfare where we're going to keep these commandments the way God has said: a good conscience, sincere faith, pure heart, and to love by waiting. It's going to be obvious that it's not about me, it's not about you. It's going to be obvious that God has done this work. And I think that's true of every person who has submitted to God. It's obvious. Jesus lives in that person. So let that be our warfare. Let that be our goal, the goal of our instruction, or the goal that we pursue as well. And when I think warfare, I think it means no prisoners. It means being serious about that and getting rigid and adamant about it. Another thing that's really pulling at us is to settle for an old covenant standard of living, I would say. Especially, I was just hearing a Christian Worldview news this week, today actually, and there was some talk about how I think a school in Texas, there was a law being passed that they were going to allow the Ten Commandments to be displayed there again. And I think a lot of people will probably be very happy to hear that. But then I try to relate that to how would that work in my own life? If somebody came into my house and said, oh, okay, so then in the article, it said this was a great victory for liberty. Okay, well, I try to apply that to my own life. If somebody came into my house and said, you're living a pretty good life, but you'd really be free if you had a little statue of the Ten Commandments over there, if you had a little image of Jesus on your wall there, you'd really get the next step of freedom. Would we think that was true? Would we go for that? I wouldn't. That's not the new covenant life. The new covenant life is so much beyond what Moses was asking of us. Jesus is saying much more. And so I think a lot of us we're being flooded by these things. There's a lot of conservative thought out there today. It sounds pretty Christian, but it's not the new covenant life. When I put those ideas up against this verse I just read here in 1 Timothy, wage the good warfare to keep a good conscience and a sincere faith and a pure heart and love. That other stuff pales in comparison to that. I don't want to get bogged down with politics and conservative thought. I'm not going to settle for, well, at least we know there's only two genders, and now these become the hill I die on. That's not the New Testament. When we read this verse and we see that's the warfare we need to be waging, well, let's be aware of the fact that there's a lot of warfare going on to just have us be religious. If Satan can't make you filthy and do sin, horrible things, he will try to get us distracted with entertainment, And the other thing he's going to do is he's going to just get us to settle and be religious. Let's not be religious. This stuff here about that Timothy was talking about, or that Paul was talking about in Timothy, is all about having a relationship, a daily, constant relationship with Jesus. So that's what we need to be so adamant about. Let's not settle for anything less. Treat it like it's a war, because it is. And we know we can pray boldly about these things whenever we know that the Lord has said something, that it's his will for his people to live a certain way. We can pray with 100% confidence. We can go boldly to the throne. And that's my encouragement to you. Let's go boldly and wage this warfare and ask the Lord to give us this heart. Ask the Lord to make our relationship with him the priority, the simplicity of the gospel. So believe that that's the Lord's will for you, and pray in faith, and keep listening to that still small voice. And the Lord will glorify himself through your life, and we'll experience joy and peace that running after religious things will never do. We're going to get past this sense of accomplishment, and we're just going to get to that place where we're resting, knowing that he loves us and that he's our Father. That's what we want to get to. And that place where we're not shaken by the things around us, because we know that we are resting with the Father daily.